Jake Morrison had never seen anything like Valoria Prime before. The planet's capital city stretched across the horizon in towers that looked like they were made of glass and light. His transport ship descended through purple clouds, and Jake pressed his face closer to the window. After 3 weeks in space, he was ready to stand on solid ground again. First time off Earth, Morrison? Lieutenant Ryan Hayes sat across from him, checking his rifle for the 10th time that morning. Yes, sir, Jake said. He was only 26 years old, but he had served in the Marines for 8 years. This was his first assignment beyond the solar system. Just remember your training. Watch everything. Trust nothing until we know these aliens better. Ryan was older, maybe 40, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. The transport landed in a wide plaza outside a massive building that the briefing files called the Crystal Spires. Jake followed his team down the ramp, his boots hitting alien ground for the first time. The air smelled different here, like rain and something sweet he could not name. Valorian soldiers waited for them in neat rows. They stood 7 feet tall with scales that changed colors in the sunlight. Their faces were long and narrow, with large eyes that seemed to see everything. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. These beings looked like the lizards from Earth, but they moved with grace and intelligence that was completely human. Welcome to Valoria Prime. One of the aliens stepped forward. His scales were deep blue with silver edges. I am Commander Zeltak of the Royal Guard. We will escort you to your quarters. Ambassador Lauren Phillips, the leader of Earth's delegation, nodded politely. We're honored to be here, Commander. Jake and his security team formed up around the ambassador. There were only 5 of them for this mission. Besides Jake and Ryan, there was Corporal Megan Torres, who was the best shot Jake had ever seen. 2 other Marines, Danny Cooper and Frank Miller, completed the team. The Valorians led them through corridors that seemed to glow from within the walls. Jake kept his hand near his weapon, not touching it but ready. His job was simple: keep the ambassador alive while she negotiated Earth's entry into the Galactic Coalition. They passed rooms full of aliens Jake did not recognize. Some looked like insects standing upright. Others had skin that seemed to be made of stone. The galaxy was much bigger than he had imagined growing up in Boston. Your quarters. Commander Zeltak stopped at a large door that slid open silently. The negotiations begin tomorrow morning. Until then, you are free to explore the public areas of the palace. But please do not wander into restricted zones. After the Valorians left, Ryan gathered the team. Shifts of 2. Morrison, you're with Torres for first watch. Cooper and Miller, get some sleep. We rotate every 6 hours. Jake and Megan took up position outside the ambassador's suite. The corridor was quiet except for the soft sounds of alien conversations in the distance. What do you think of them? Megan asked after an hour. She was from Texas and never stayed quiet for long. The Valorians? They seem organized, military. Jake watched a group of aliens walk past. Their scales rippled with colors he had no names for. I meant all of them. Every species we've seen. We're the new kids in a very old school, Jake. She was right. Humanity had only developed faster than light travel 15 years ago. Every other species in the coalition had been traveling the stars for centuries or longer. The next morning, Jake stood in the Grand Forum while the negotiations began. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Representatives from 7 alien species sat at a circular table. Ambassador Phillips sat between the Valorian delegation and empty chairs meant for humanity's future place in the coalition. Jake positioned himself against the wall where he could see the whole room. Ryan stood on the opposite side. Megan watched the entrance. Then Empress Zarathel entered, and everyone stood. She was smaller than the other Valorians, maybe 6 feet tall, with scales that shifted between green and gold. She wore simple robes, not the heavy clothing Jake expected from royalty. Her eyes were bright amber, and when she looked around the room, Jake felt like she could see into everyone's thoughts. Please, be seated, she said. Her voice was clear and strong, speaking perfect English through a translation device. We gather today to welcome humanity into our coalition. This is a historic moment. Not everyone looked happy about it. The Krethian delegation, the insect-like aliens Ryan had warned him about, sat rigid in their chairs. Their ambassador, a creature with black armor-like skin and too many arms, stared at Ambassador Phillips with obvious dislike. The negotiations moved slowly. Each species wanted to discuss trade rights, military obligations, and cultural exchanges. Jake tried to stay focused, but his eyes kept drifting to Empress Zarathel. She listened more than she spoke. When she did say something, the other species paid attention. She had power here, real power, but she did not wave it around like a weapon. Jake respected that. During a break, Ambassador Phillips stepped close to Jake. "What do you think, Sergeant?" "About the negotiations, ma'am?" "About anything. You've been watching that Krethian ambassador." "I saw you," Jake hesitated. He was a soldier, not a diplomat, but the ambassador had asked. "He looks angry, ma'am." "Really angry? And he keeps touching something under his robe." Phillips frowned. "Keep watching him. Tell Lieutenant Hayes." The negotiations continued for 3 days. Jake barely slept, running on coffee and military discipline. He watched the Krethian ambassador grow more tense with each passing hour. The other Krethians in the delegation seemed nervous too, their antennae twitching constantly. On the 3rd day, Jake stood in his usual position while the treaty signing ceremony began. This was it, the moment Earth officially joined the galactic community. Ambassador Phillips sat at the table with a pen specially made for this occasion. Representatives from each species would sign in turn. Jake's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. The Krethian ambassador had his hand inside his robe, and his body language was all wrong. Jake had seen this before, back on Earth, right before someone pulled a weapon. He glanced at Ryan, who had noticed it too. They both started moving toward the table. Then the Krethian ambassador stood up fast, pulling something from his robe. Jake saw metal and glowing energy, a weapon, but it was not pointed at Ambassador Phillips. The plasma gun aimed straight at Empress Zarathel. Time seemed to slow down. Jake could see the ambassador's finger tightening on the trigger. He could see the Empress looking at a document, unaware of the danger. He could see royal guards starting to react, but they were too far away. Jake did not think. His body moved on pure instinct, trained by years of protecting others. He launched himself forward, crossing the 15 feet between him and the Empress in 3 running steps. He threw his whole body between her and the weapon just as the Krethian fired. The plasma bolt hit Jake in the chest, like a hammer made of fire. Pain exploded through Jake's chest and shoulder. The force of the plasma bolt threw him backward, and he crashed into Empress Zarathel. They both hit the floor hard. Jake felt his blood spreading across the polished stone beneath him. The grand forum erupted in chaos. People screamed. Chairs scraped across the floor. Jake heard weapons firing, but everything sounded far away, like he was underwater. "Sergeant Morrison!" Ryan's voice cut through the confusion. Hands grabbed Jake and rolled him onto his back. The lieutenant's face appeared above him, pale and tight with worry. "Stay with me, Marine." "That's an order." Jake tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He could not feel his right arm at all. His chest felt like someone had reached inside and set his lungs on fire. He knew what these wounds meant. He had seen enough combat to recognize a fatal injury. "Medical team to the Grand Forum immediately." Ryan was shouting into his communicator while pressing emergency seals against Jake's chest. The seals were designed for bullet wounds, not plasma burns. Blood kept pouring out between Ryan's fingers. Megan dropped to her knees beside them. Her hands shook as she pulled more medical supplies from her pack. "Come on, Jake, don't you dare die on us." Through the pain and the growing darkness at the edges of his vision, Jake saw the Valorian royal guards drag the Krethian ambassador away. The alien was screaming something in a language Jake did not understand. 2 other Krethians tried to run but were tackled by guards. Ambassador Phillips was yelling orders, trying to restore control. The other alien delegates were either taking cover or trying to help. It was a complete mess. Then Empress Zarathel pushed through the crowd and fell to her knees beside Jake. Her scales had turned completely white, which Jake somehow knew meant fear or shock in her species. Her amber eyes were wide as she looked at his wounds. "You saved my life," she said, her voice shaking. "Why? You do not know me." Jake tried to answer, but only blood came out. His vision was getting darker. He could hear Ryan and Megan talking, but their words did not make sense anymore. He felt cold despite the fire in his chest. The Empress looked at her own guards. "Where are the healers?" "They are coming, Your Majesty, but—" The commander's voice trailed off. Everyone could see that Jake would not last long enough for healers to arrive. Empress Zarathel closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they burned with determination. She placed both of her hands on Jake's chest directly over his wounds. Her scales began to glow with a soft golden light. "No, Your Majesty." Commander Zeltok grabbed her arm. "You cannot. The laws forbid it except in the most extreme situations. This man took a weapon meant for me. If that is not extreme, then what is?" She pulled her arm free and pressed her hands harder against Jake's chest. The glow from her scales grew brighter. Jake felt warmth spreading from where she touched him, pushing back against the cold that was trying to claim him. It was not like any medicine he had ever experienced. This was something else entirely, something that made his skin tingle and his mind buzz with strange sensations. "Your Majesty, if you create a bond with him, it cannot be undone," Zeltok said urgently. "He is an alien. The Council will never accept this. I do not care what the Council accepts." The Empress's voice was steady now, filled with power. "I will not let him die for me." The golden glow became almost blinding. Jake felt his heartbeat growing stronger instead of weaker. The pain in his chest changed from sharp agony to a dull ache. He sucked in a breath and tasted air instead of blood. "The healers are here," someone shouted. Valorian medical personnel swarmed around them. They wore white robes and carried equipment that looked nothing like human medical tools. They tried to get the Empress to move, but she refused to take her hands off Jake's chest. "Stabilize him first," she commanded. "Then I will step back." The healers worked quickly. They injected Jake with things that made his veins burn and then go numb. They sealed his wounds with a foam that hardened into something like skin. Through it all, the Empress kept her hands on his chest, that golden glow never fading. Finally, one of the healers nodded. "He is stable enough to move, Your Majesty, but he needs advanced treatment immediately." The Empress slowly lifted her hands. The golden glow faded, but Jake could still feel something connecting them. It was like a thread he could not see but knew was there, running from his chest to hers. "Take him to the Royal Medical Facility," she ordered. "Give him whatever treatment he needs. I do not care about the cost." They lifted Jake onto a floating stretcher that hovered in the air without any visible support. As they carried him away, he managed to turn his head enough to see the Empress. She stood in the middle of the chaos, her white robes covered in his blood, her scales still glowing faintly. Their eyes met for a moment. Then the darkness finally won, and Jake knew nothing more. Jake woke up in pieces. First he heard steady beeping sounds. Then he felt something soft beneath him. Finally he managed to open his eyes, white ceiling, white walls. Equipment he did not recognize surrounding a bed that was much larger than a human bed. He was in a hospital, but not any hospital he had ever seen. "He's awake." Megan's face appeared in his vision. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Sergeant." Jake tried to speak. His throat was dry and his voice came out as a croak. "How long?" 3 weeks. Ryan moved into view on his other side. "You've been in a coma while they rebuilt your chest. That plasma bolt should have killed you instantly, Jake. The doctors here still don't understand how you're alive." "The Empress," Jake managed to say. He remembered her hands on his chest, the golden glow, the warmth pushing back the cold. Ryan and Megan exchanged looks. "Yeah, about that," Ryan said carefully. "There have been some complications." Before Jake could ask what that meant, the door slid open. Ambassador Phillips entered, followed by 2 Valorian healers and Commander Zeltok. "Sergeant Morrison," Phillips said, "I'm glad to see you awake. How do you feel?" "Like I got shot with a plasma weapon, ma'am." Jake tried to sit up, but his body would not cooperate. "Don't move yet," one of the healers said in accented English. "Your body is still adjusting to the treatments. We had to use both human and Valorian techniques to save you. Your chest is now part organic tissue and part synthetic material grown from Valorian biology." Jake looked down at himself. Bandages covered most of his chest and shoulder. "Will I be able to return to duty?" "Eventually, yes. But there is something else you need to know." The healer glanced at Ambassador Phillips, who nodded. "When Empress Zara Thel saved your life, she used a technique that is sacred to her people," Phillips said. "She created what they call a life bond. It's a permanent connection between 2 individuals. In Valorian culture, such a bond carries enormous significance." "What kind of significance?" Jake's head was starting to hurt. Commander Zeltok stepped forward. His scales were dark blue, almost black. "In our oldest laws, a life bond can only be created between equals. By bonding with you, the Empress has declared you her equal under Valorian law." "Equal? I'm just a sergeant, sir. I'm nobody." "You are no longer just a sergeant," Zeltok said. By accepting the Empress's life energy, you have become recognized as her bonded consort. In simple terms that humans might understand, you are now considered her husband in the eyes of Valorian law and custom. The room spun. Jake was sure he had misunderstood. That's impossible. I didn't agree to anything. I was dying. The bond does not require agreement, the healer explained. It simply is. Once created, it cannot be broken except by death. You and the Empress are now connected for the rest of your lives. The Valorian High Council is in emergency session, Philip said. Some members want to find a way to break the bond. Others see it as binding and sacred. It's become a major political situation. Jake closed his eyes. He had jumped in front of a plasma bolt to save someone's life. That was his job, his duty as a Marine. He had never expected to wake up as some kind of alien prince. The next few days passed in a blur of doctors, physical therapy, and visitors. Jake's body healed faster than any human body should. The Valorian treatments worked in ways that human medicine could not match. Within a week, he could sit up. Within 2 weeks, he could walk. But the life bond, that was harder to understand. Jake could feel the Empress even when she was not in the room. It was not like reading her mind or anything that simple. It was more like knowing someone was standing behind you without looking. He could sense her emotions as distant echoes of his own feelings. When she was happy, he felt lighter. When she was stressed, tension built in his own chest. It was strange and uncomfortable and impossibly intimate. Empress Zarathel visited him every day. At first, she came with guards and advisors, keeping everything formal and proper. They talked about his recovery and the political situation. She never mentioned the bond directly. But after a week, she started coming alone in the evening when the medical staff changed shifts. She would sit in the chair beside his bed and talk about things that had nothing to do with politics. I was 7 years old when my mother died, she told him one night. My father ruled for another 10 years before he passed. I became Empress at 17. I am 32 now, and I have been alone in this position for 15 years. You have advisors, guards, your whole government, Jake said. Yes, but they serve the Empress, not Zarathel. They see the crown, not the person wearing it. She looked at her hands. Her scales were deep green tonight, which meant she was calm. Jake was learning to read her colors. When you threw yourself in front of that weapon, you did not know who I was. You simply saw someone in danger and acted. Do you know how rare that is? Jake did not know what to say to that. He had acted on instinct, nothing more. I'm a Marine. Protecting people is what I do. Most people hesitate. Even trained soldiers think for a moment before risking their lives. You did not hesitate at all. She smiled, and Jake noticed how it changed her whole face. That is why I bonded with you. Not just because you saved my life, but because your actions showed the kind of person you are. I'm not special, Jake said. I'm just a guy from Boston who joined the military because he did not know what else to do with his life. Then perhaps you have found what to do with your life now. Jake thought about that long after she left. He was 30 floors up in a palace on an alien world, connected by some mystical bond to an empress who ruled billions of people. His life had gone completely sideways, but strangely he did not hate it. His sister Kate called from Earth using the long-range communication system. The delay was only a few seconds, but it felt longer as Jake searched for words to explain his situation. So you're married to an alien queen now? Kate's face on the screen showed confusion and concern in equal measure.
Jake, what the hell?
It's not like that. Well, it is like that, but I didn't plan it. I just did my job. Your job was to protect the ambassador, not become alien royalty. Kate ran her hand through her hair, a gesture Jake recognized from childhood. She did it when she was trying not to yell. Mom is freaking out. She thinks you're never coming home. I don't know if I am coming home, Jake admitted. The bond can't be broken. If I leave, the Empress and I both feel it. The distance causes pain for both of us. The healer said it could kill us if we stay separated too long. That's insane. That's like something from a science fiction movie. I know. I'm living it, and I still can't believe it's real. Kate was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? Really okay, not just physically? Jake considered the question. I think so. Kate, she's lonely. I can feel it through the bond. She has all this power and responsibility and no one she can really talk to. And now I'm here connected to her whether we like it or not, and maybe that's not the worst thing. You like her. Kate's voice was softer now. I barely know her. But yeah, I think I could like her. She's smart and strong, and she cares about her people more than herself. That's worth something. After the call ended, Jake sat in the dark room and thought about home. Boston seemed very far away. His old life seemed like it belonged to a different person. Ambassador Phillips came to see him a week later with news. Earth's government has made a decision. They want you to stay on Valoria Prime. They're ordering me to stay. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. No, they're asking you to stay. As a liaison between Earth and Valoria, your unique position could help both our peoples. Phillips sat down heavily. The truth is, Jake, you've become more valuable than a whole embassy. Every species in the coalition is watching to see what happens with you and the Empress. You're a symbol now, whether you want to be or not. What if I want to go home? Then you can. You'll be honorably discharged with full benefits. But the bond will cause problems. You and the Empress will both suffer, and Earth will lose a major diplomatic advantage. Jake laughed bitterly. So I'm a diplomatic advantage now? You're a Marine who saved an Empress's life and earned her respect. Yes, that's an advantage. But more than that, you're a good man who ended up in an impossible situation. What you do next is up to you. The Valorian High Council demanded a meeting with Jake 3 weeks after he woke up. He dressed in his Marine uniform, the one the palace staff had repaired and cleaned. The plasma burn had destroyed the original, but they had made a perfect replacement. Ryan and Megan escorted him to the council chambers. Just be yourself, Ryan advised. Don't try to be something you're not. They respect honesty. The council chambers were smaller than Jake expected, with curved walls and soft lighting. 12 Valorian elders sat in a semicircle. Empress Zarathel sat on a raised chair in the center, wearing formal robes that caught the light like captured starlight. Jake stood before them, a human Marine facing alien leaders who had been alive longer than his entire country. Sergeant Jake Morrison, the eldest counselor, spoke. His scales were gray with age. You have created a situation that has not occurred in 3,000 years of Valorian history. An Empress has bonded with an alien. The council is divided on what this means for our people. I did not intend to cause problems, Jake said. I only wanted to protect someone from harm. Intention does not change reality. You are now bound to our Empress by the oldest magic our people possess. Some on this council believe this bond dishonors our traditions. Others believe it represents a new path forward. The old counselor leaned forward. What do you believe, human? Jake looked at Empress Zarathel. She met his eyes steadily, her scales showing calm green, but he could feel her nervousness through the bond. I believe, Jake said slowly, that I don't understand your traditions or your magic.
I'm just a soldier from a young species that's new to all of this.
But I know what honor is. I know what duty is. And I know that when someone saves your life, you owe them respect and consideration. The Empress saved your life after you saved hers, another counselor said. Life for life. The debt is balanced. No, it's not. Jake kept his voice steady. She saved my life and tied herself to me forever. That's not a simple trade. That's a sacrifice. And I intend to honor that sacrifice by being worthy of it. Silence filled the chamber. Jake could feel every eye on him. Finally, Empress Zarathel stood. The council will deliberate on Sergeant Morrison's status. But I will tell you all now. My decision is made. I created the bond willingly. I knew the consequences. This human showed more courage in one moment than most beings show in a lifetime. If you cannot accept him, then you cannot accept me. The threat was clear. If the council rejected Jake, the Empress would fight them. Jake felt a surge of emotion through the bond that took him a moment to recognize. She cared about him. Really cared. Not just because of the bond, but because of who he was. And standing there in front of alien leaders who could decide his fate with a word, Jake realized he cared about her too. The High Council reached their decision 3 days later. They would not break the bond, but they would not simply accept Jake as the Empress's consort either. Instead, they invoked an ancient trial called the Path of Worth. You must prove yourself to our people, the eldest counselor explained. Not to us, but to the citizens of Valoria Prime. You will face 3 challenges: wisdom, courage, and compassion. If you succeed, the people will accept you as king consort. If you fail, you will remain bonded to the Empress, but you will hold no authority or position. I never asked for authority or position, Jake said. No, but you have them nonetheless. The bond makes you the Empress's equal in the eyes of our oldest laws. That equality must be earned or it means nothing. The first challenge came 2 weeks later. Jake stood in a public forum in the capital city, broadcast across the entire planet. Thousands of Valorians filled the square, and millions more watched from their homes. 5 council members sat before him with questions designed to test his wisdom and understanding of Valorian culture. Jake had spent the previous week studying their history, laws, and philosophy. His head was full of facts about their wars, their art, their religion, their government. But the first question was not about any of that. How can a human, who has lived for barely 3 decades, claim to understand a species that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years? The counselor asked. Jake took a breath. He could feel Empress Zarathel watching from the royal box. She believed in him, but that only made the pressure worse. I can't, Jake said simply. I'll never understand everything about your people. I'll make mistakes. I'll miss important details. But I can learn. And more than that, I can bring a perspective you don't have. Sometimes an outsider sees things that people inside a culture miss. Such as? The counselor's scales showed skepticism, a dark blue-gray. Such as how isolated your Empress is. I've read your histories. For 3,000 years, your rulers have stood alone, unable to form close bonds with others because their position demanded it. That loneliness made them wise, yes, but it also made them distant from the people they served. Maybe having someone who shares their burden, who can help them stay connected to regular life, is not weakness. Maybe it's the strength your culture has been missing, the crowd murmured. The counselors exchanged looks. You speak boldly for someone so new to our world, another counselor said. I'm a soldier. I learned to speak the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. The questions continued for 3 hours. They asked about trade disputes, military strategy, resource distribution, and dozens of other topics. Jake answered some well, stumbled through others, and admitted when he simply did not know enough to have an opinion. At the end, the eldest counselor stood. You did not answer every question correctly, but you answered honestly. That is worth more than false wisdom. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some Valorians cheered, others remained silent, their scales showing doubt and worry. The second challenge came a week later in the northern territories where pirates from outside the coalition had been raiding Valorian settlements. Jake joined a Royal Guard unit led by Commander Zeltak to defend a mining colony. The pirates came in fast ships that danced through the atmosphere like birds. They hit the colony's shields with energy weapons, trying to break through and steal the valuable minerals below. Jake stood in the command center wearing Valorian combat armor that had been adjusted to fit his human body. It felt strange, lighter than human armor, but somehow stronger. The shields will fail in 30 minutes if they maintain this attack, Zeltak reported. We have fighters launching, but they will not arrive in time. Jake studied the tactical display. The pirates were using a pattern he recognized from his training, concentrating their fire on one section of the shield to create a weakness. They're going to breach the eastern shield point. When they do, they'll send in ground troops fast and hit the main processing facility. Agreed. We will defend the facility. Zeltak began issuing orders to his troops. Wait. Jake pointed at the display. If we let them think they're succeeding, we can turn it into a trap. Pull back from the facility. Hide troops in these buildings here and here. When their ground forces come in, they'll think they've won. Then we close the trap. Zeltak's scales rippled with colors Jake had learned meant he was thinking hard. It is risky. If we fail, they will take the facility. If we meet them head-on, people will die. The pirates have better weapons than us right now. But we know this ground and they don't. Let's use that. The commander looked at his officers. Several nodded. Very well. We do it your way, human. The plan worked. The pirates breached the shield exactly where Jake predicted and sent in 3 landing craft full of troops. They rushed toward the processing facility, thinking they faced minimal resistance. Jake waited with a squad of royal guards in a warehouse 50 yards from the facility. He held a Valorian energy rifle that hummed in his hands. Through the bond, he could feel Empress Zarathel's worry. She was watching from the palace, unable to help, sharing every moment of his fear and determination. Now, Zeltak said quietly. The Royal Guard units opened fire from 3 sides. The pirates were caught in the open with nowhere to hide. The fight was over in minutes. Most pirates surrendered. A few tried to fight and were quickly overwhelmed. After the battle, Jake helped pull survivors from a damaged pirate ship. One of the pirates, bleeding from a head wound, stared at him. You are the human bonded to the Empress. Yeah, Jake said, wrapping a bandage around the alien's head. You could have killed us all. Why give mercy? Because the fight is over, you lost. That doesn't mean you have to die. The pirate's eyes were filled with something like respect. I have heard stories about humans. They say you fight like demons but have strange honor. I believe it now. Word of the battle spread fast. The human who helped defend Valorian citizens and showed mercy to defeated enemies. Jake's reputation grew among the common people, though many nobles still doubted him. The third challenge was the hardest. Jake was sent to mediate a dispute in a rural province far from the capital. Two farming communities were fighting over water rights from a river that ran between them. The fight had gone on for 5 years, growing more bitter each season. Jake arrived with only a small escort. The village leaders from both sides met him in a neutral field between their lands. They were angry before he even started talking. The river flows from the mountains through our land first, one leader said. Her scales were mud brown, marking her as from the southern villages. We have first rights, but you take too much, the northern leader countered. His scales were lighter, dusty yellow. Your farms leave nothing for ours. Our children go thirsty while your crops grow fat. They argued for an hour while Jake listened. He had studied the case files, knew the legal history, understood both sides' positions. But law was not going to solve this. These people had stopped listening to each other years ago. Finally, Jake held up his hand. I want to see the river. Both of you come with me. They hiked to where the river crossed the border between the territories. Jake stood on the bank and looked at the water flowing past. It was wide and deep here, plenty for everyone if used right. How much water do your farms actually need? Jake asked the southern leader. All of it at planting season, less at other times. And you? He asked the northern leader. Steady amounts all year. We cannot survive on what they leave us during planting season. Then the solution is storage, Jake said. The southern farms need a lot of water for a short time. The northern farms need less water for a longer time. Build a reservoir here at the border. The south can fill it during the wet season when there's extra water. The north can draw from it during the dry season. Everyone gets what they need. That would cost money, the southern leader said. Who pays? Both communities pay. Half and half. You work together on the project. Your children work side by side building something that helps both villages. Jake looked at them both. Or you can keep fighting for another 5 years and watch your people suffer. Your choice. The leaders looked at each other. The northern leader's scales shifted toward a lighter color. I would agree to this, if the South agrees. The southern leader was quiet for a long moment. Finally, her scales softened too. Perhaps we have been too focused on who has the right and not enough on what works. Yes, I agree. They shook hands, a human gesture they had learned from cultural exchanges. Jake felt relief flood through him, and through the bond, he felt Empress Zarathel's pride and joy mixing with his own emotions. When Jake returned to the capital 3 weeks later, having visited a dozen more communities with disputes, the city was decorated with banners. A crowd lined the streets as his transport drove toward the palace. They are celebrating you, Zeltok said. He sat across from Jake in the transport. The people have spoken. You have proven your worth. I just tried to help, Jake said. That is exactly why you succeeded. The coronation ceremony took place under 3 moons on a warm evening in late summer. The entire capital city gathered in the grand plaza below the crystal spires. Representatives from every coalition species attended, including a large human delegation from Earth. Jake stood in a preparation room wearing robes that mixed Valorian design with human military elements. The outfit felt strange, but when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone who belonged in both worlds. Ryan entered the room. He wore his dress uniform with every metal polished. Ready for this? No, Jake admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. That's pretty much been your approach to everything since we got here. Ryan smiled. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. The whole security team is. You took a plasma bolt and turned it into peace between species. That's one hell of a career move. I didn't plan any of this. The best things in life are never planned. Ryan clasped Jake's shoulder. Your sister is here, by the way. Front row with the Earth delegation. Jake felt his heart jump. Kate had come all this way. That meant everything. Empress Zarathel entered from the other door. She wore white robes that seemed to glow with their own light. Her scales were radiant gold. the color that meant pure joy in Valorian culture. Through the bond, Jake felt her happiness mixing with nervousness. "You look beautiful," Jake said. "You look terrified," she replied, but she was smiling. "We can still stop this. If you are not ready, if you do not want this life, I will understand." Jake thought about the past 6 months, the pain, the confusion, the challenges, but also the purpose, the connection, the feeling that he was doing something that mattered. He thought about the farmers who had stopped fighting because he helped them find common ground, the miners who were alive because he defended them, the Valorian people who had accepted him not because they had to, but because he had earned their trust. "I'm ready," he said. "Are you ready to share your crown?" "I have been alone for 15 years. I am more than ready." They walked together through the palace corridors toward the plaza. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step. When they emerged onto the balcony high above the plaza, a roar went up that shook the air. The High Council waited on the balcony. The eldest counselor held a crown made of crystallized starlight, one of the most precious objects in Valorian culture. "Jake Morrison," the counselor's voice carried across the plaza through speakers. "You came to our world as a soldier. You stayed as a protector. You proved yourself as a leader. Now you stand before us ready to become one of us. Do you accept the responsibilities of the king consort? Will you serve the people of Valoria Prime alongside their Empress? Will you be a bridge between your species and ours?" "I will," Jake said. His voice was steady. "Then kneel." Jake knelt on one knee. Empress Zarathel stood beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. The counselor placed the crown on Jake's head. It was lighter than he expected, warm against his skin. "Rise, King Consort Jake Morrison. Rise and take your place," Jake stood. The crowd erupted in cheers that went on and on. He looked out at thousands of Valorian faces, their scales showing every color of celebration and hope. In the front row of the human section, he saw Kate crying and clapping. Empress Zarathel took his hand. "We do this together now. Everything." "Together," Jake agreed. The first year of Jake's reign was harder than the trial of worth. Being recognized as king was one thing. Actually ruling was something else entirely. Conservative Valorians formed opposition groups arguing that the Empress had weakened their culture by bonding with an alien. They called for her to step down, to let a pure Valorian take the throne. Human extremist groups were just as bad. They published articles calling Jake a traitor who had abandoned Earth for power. They claimed he was being controlled by alien technology. Some demanded Earth cut all ties with Valoria. Jake and Zarathel faced each challenge together. When Valorian protesters gathered outside the palace, Jake went out to talk to them personally. He listened to their concerns, acknowledged their fears, and explained that he was not trying to replace Valorian culture, only add to it. When human media attacked him, Zarathel gave interviews defending him. Speaking to human reporters in English, she was learning to speak without a translator. She explained that Jake had not abandoned Earth. He had expanded what it meant to be human. Slowly, the opposition weakened. Not because people stopped disagreeing, but because Jake and Zarathel proved every day that their partnership worked. They created exchange programs between Earth and Valoria Prime. Human students studied at Valorian universities. Valorian artists displayed their work in human museums. Military units from both species trained together, learning from each other's strengths. Trade agreements followed. Earth's manufacturing capabilities combined with Valorian scientific advances created new technologies that benefited both worlds. The partnership became the model for cooperation throughout the coalition, but the real test came 3 years after the coronation, when extremists struck again. A Valorian supremacist group attacked a human settlement on the edge of Valorian space, killing 23 people, including children. Jake sat in the war room with Zarathel and the military council. His hands shook with rage. Through the bond, he could feel her matching fury. "We must respond with force," Commander Zeltak said. "If we show weakness, more attacks will follow." "These are my people," Jake said quietly. "Valorians who hate what I represent. If I order military action against them, I prove their point that I am against Valoria." "If you do nothing," Zarathel said, "you tell everyone that Valorian lives matter less than politics. You cannot let fear of criticism stop you from protecting innocence." Jake looked at his wife. She was right, but it hurt. "Send the Royal Guard, arrest everyone involved. They get fair trials, but they face justice. No exceptions. The operation was successful. The extremists were captured without additional deaths, but Jake had to watch as Valorians he had sworn to protect were led away in chains. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. The trials revealed that the attacks were funded by several noble families who wanted to destabilize Jake's position. When the evidence came out, public opinion turned sharply against the extremists. Even conservative Valorians who had opposed Jake's coronation condemned the violence. "You made the right choice," Zarathel told him that night. They stood on their private balcony looking at the city lights. "It cost you, I know. I felt your pain through the bond. But you chose justice over comfort. That is what a king does." "I hate it," Jake admitted. "I never wanted to be a king. I just wanted to be a good soldier." "You are still a good soldier. You are also a good king. The two are not so different. Both require sacrifice. Both require putting others before yourself." 5 years after taking the plasma bolt, Jake stood in the same plaza where he had been crowned. But this time, he held a baby in his arms. Victoria Morrison Thalara had been born 3 weeks earlier, surprising every doctor who said human-Valorian hybrids were genetically impossible. She had her mother's scales, beautiful green and gold that shifted with her moods. She had her father's blue eyes that looked at the world with endless curiosity. The people had gathered to see the child who represented the future of both species. Jake held her carefully, terrified of dropping her, amazed that something so small and perfect could exist. "She has your stubbornness," Zarathel whispered. "She refused to sleep all last night." "She has your beauty," Jake replied, "and probably your intelligence. I just hope she has better luck than her parents when it comes to normal, boring lives." Zarathel laughed. "I think that ship has sailed." Ambassador Phillips stood nearby with Kate, who had moved to Valoria Prime 2 years ago to work in the cultural exchange program. Phillips had been promoted to Earth's coalition representative, working from the capital. "You know they are naming a ship class after you," Phillips said to Jake. "The Morrison-class diplomatic vessels. First one launches next month. That's ridiculous. I'm not dead yet." "No, but you are a symbol, whether you like it or not." Phillips smiled. "A symbol of what happens when people choose courage over fear." Later, after the crowds dispersed and Victoria finally fell asleep, Jake and Zarathel walked through the palace gardens. Human roses grew alongside Valorian crystal flowers now, 2 species thriving together in the same soil. "Do you regret it?" Zarathel asked quietly. "The life you gave up?" Jake thought about Boston, about the simple apartment he had lived in, about the military career he had planned. That life seemed like it belonged to someone else now. "No," he said honestly. "I miss my old life sometimes. I miss knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. But I wouldn't trade this. Not the challenges, not the responsibility, not even the extremists who want us to fail. Why not? Because I found something here I never had back on Earth. Purpose that matters. A partner who sees me for who I really am. A daughter who proves that impossible things can happen." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I took that plasma bolt because it was the right thing to do. I stayed because you gave me a reason to stay. I became king because our people needed to see that different worlds can unite, and I would do it all again." Zarathel's scales shifted to deep gold, the color of love in Valorian culture. "I created the bond to save your life, but I fell in love with you because of who you are, not because of any magic connecting us." "Good," Jake said. "Because I love you too. Bond or no bond, magic or no magic, I would still choose you." They kissed under the 3 moons while their daughter slept safely inside the palace. Human and Valorian, soldier and Empress, 2 people from impossible backgrounds who found each other in the worst moment and made it into something beautiful. 10 years after the assassination attempt, historians across the coalition would write about this moment as the turning point in galactic relations. The day a human soldier took a blow meant for an alien Empress and changed everything. But for Jake Morrison, standing in a garden with his wife and thinking about their daughter sleeping peacefully in the royal nursery, it was simpler than that. He had seen someone in danger. He had acted without thinking. And that single moment of instinct had given him a life he never could have imagined. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not plan, not calculate, not worry about consequences. Sometimes you just have to move forward and trust that courage will be enough. Jake had learned that lesson on a forum floor with plasma burning through his chest. He carried it with him every day as king, as husband, as father. It shaped every decision he made, every policy he supported, every person he helped. You do not choose the moments that define you. You only choose what kind of person you will be when those moments arrive. Everything else follows from that choice. And Jake Morrison had chosen to be the kind of person who takes the blow, so others do not have to. That choice made him a king. But more importantly, it made him the man his daughter would grow up to admire, the partner his wife could truly trust, and the symbol of hope for billions of people across the stars. In the end, that was worth more than any crown.